The thick manila envelope slid from my fingers and hit the marble countertop with a dull thud. My coffee went cold beside it, forgotten. I stared at the photographs spread before me, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Emily, my wife of 11 years. In the arms of a stranger. I picked up one of the photos with trembling fingers. The lighting was dim, but there was no mistaking her cascade of auburn hair or the small birthmark just below her left collarbone, visible because the stranger's hand was pushing down the fabric of her blouse. They were standing in what looked like a hotel lobby, his lips pressed against her neck, her eyes closed in obvious pleasure. Another photo showed them entering what I recognized as the Riviera Hotel downtown. A third captured them laughing over wine at Marcello's, our favorite restaurant. My stomach clenched. We had celebrated our anniversary there just 2 months ago. A small white card had fallen from the envelope. I flipped it over and read the neat, typewritten message. Dig deeper. Nothing is what it seems. No signature. No return address on the envelope. Just my name and our home address printed on a label. I gathered the photos and stuffed everything back into the envelope, my breath coming in short bursts. This had to be a mistake or some cruel prank. Emily and I had built a life together. We had discussed having children next year. She couldn't, be doing this. Yet the knot in my gut told me otherwise. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, hardly noticing the burn as it went down. My laptop sat on the kitchen island where I'd been reviewing quarterly reports before collecting the mail. Almost without thinking, I opened Emily's shared calendar. For the past year, she'd been traveling more frequently for her role as marketing director. Dallas, Chicago, San Francisco. Trips that sometimes stretched from 3 days to a week. I stared at the screen, my eyes fixing on her most recent journey to Boston last month. 4 days of meetings with a potential new client. A quick check of our credit card statement showed a payment to a rideshare service. In New York, not Boston. The same statement showed charges at a restaurant and a boutique in Manhattan on dates when she was supposedly giving presentations in Massachusetts. The front door lock clicked. I closed the laptop and slid the envelope into a drawer just as Emily walked in, her cheeks flushed, eyes bright. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize, and when she hugged me, I caught the scent of an unfamiliar perfume mingled with alcohol. "You're home late," I managed, forcing a smile. "The team wanted to celebrate landing the Westbrook account," she said, dropping her keys in the bowl by the door. "You should have seen Janet after her 3rd martini. Complete disaster." She laughed, heading toward the bedroom. "I'm going to shower before dinner." I watched her disappear down the hallway, noting how she avoided my eyes. How many times had I missed that? How many other small deceptions had slipped past me? That night, while Emily slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The photographs kept flashing through my mind. The stranger's hand on her waist. Her smile, not the polite one she now gave me over breakfast, but something genuine, vibrant. I turned my head to look at her sleeping form, her back to me as usual. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. Now a mystery. A stranger. By morning I had made my decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. I needed more information, needed to understand the full scope of whatever was happening. The card was right, I had to dig deeper. Over breakfast, I casually mentioned a new tracking app I'd discovered. "It might be good for both of us to have it installed," I said, buttering my toast with steady hands. "With all the traveling we both do. Just for safety." Emily nodded absently, scrolling through emails on her phone. "Sure, whatever you think is best." She handed me her phone without looking up. As I installed the app, setting it to silent notifications and hidden mode, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial shock had hardened into something colder, more focused. My wife was having an affair. And given the elaborate deceptions she'd constructed, it seemed unlikely this was just about passion or boredom. There was something else going on, something suggested by those carefully orchestrated trips and the mystery man whose face I couldn't quite make out in the photographs. I handed her phone back with a smile. All set. The game had begun. And I intended to win. For 2 weeks I lived a double life. Attentive husband in the evenings, amateur detective by day. The tracking app became my constant companion, its blue dot following Emily across the city like a digital bloodhound. I started keeping a journal, times, locations, supposed meetings that didn't align with her actual whereabouts. The pattern emerged quickly. Every Tuesday and Thursday between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, Emily's dot would hover at the Riviera Hotel in the business district. The same hotel from the photographs. "Conference call with the Dallas team this afternoon," she told me over breakfast on the 3rd Tuesday, not looking up from her tablet. "Might run late." I nodded, sipping my coffee. No problem. I've got that dinner with the Peterson account anyway. There was no Peterson account. There was only me, sitting in my parked car across from the Riviera's gleaming entrance, camera in hand, stomach churning with each passing minute. At precisely 2:15, a black Audi pulled up to the curb. The man who stepped out was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to the finer things in life. Old money, I guessed, or very successful new money. 5 minutes later, Emily's Lexus arrived. My fingers tightened around the camera as I raised it to my eye. Through the zoom lens, I watched my wife emerge, smoothing her skirt, checking her reflection in the car window. She looked beautiful, radiant even, more alive than I'd seen her in months. The man approached, kissed her cheek with practiced familiarity, then guided her into the hotel with his hand at the small of her back. I took photo after photo, my breath fogging the car window, until they disappeared through the revolving doors. I sat there for the next 2 hours, feeling hollow until they emerged. More photos. More evidence of what I already knew but couldn't fully accept. That night, I called Stanley Mercer, a private investigator recommended by my company's head of security. I emailed him the photos, both mine and the anonymous ones, and arranged to meet the following day. "This is thorough work already," Stanley said, leafing through my journal in a nondescript coffee shop far from my office. He was older than I expected, with shrewd eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. "Most clients come to me with nothing but suspicions. I need to know everything," I said. "Who he is, how long it's been going on, and most importantly why." Stanley raised an eyebrow. "Why? The affair seems calculated. The hotel's the schedule. And there's something about those anonymous photos. Someone wanted me to know." "Could be a concerned friend," Stanley suggested. "Or someone with a grudge against your wife or her companion." "Find out," I said, sliding an envelope with his retainer across the table. "Whatever it costs." 1 week later, Stanley's comprehensive report landed in my encrypted email. I waited until Emily left for a weekend marketing retreat before opening it. The man's name was Alex Craig, 41 years old, Harvard Business School, CEO of Meridian Capital Partners. I recognized the company name immediately. They were major players in the financial sector, known for aggressive acquisition strategies. I scrolled through financial records, hotel receipts, timestamps from security cameras. The affair had been going on for 13 months, almost exactly when Emily's business trips had increased. But it was the last section of the report that made my blood freeze in my veins. Recent financial transactions of interest. 6 deposits of $25,000 each into a previously unknown account in Emily's name. Alex Craig's shell company, Alpine Ventures, purchasing 7% of Martech Industries stock through various intermediaries over the past 10 months. Martech Industries, my company. With trembling fingers, I opened another attachment, photos of Emily and Alex together, exchanging what appeared to be documents in a park. The timestamp showed 3 days before our biggest client unexpectedly pulled their contract, sending our stock plummeting. The final pages contained information about Alex Craig's recent business activities. He had systematically been acquiring controlling interests in several tech companies, companies that mysteriously experienced leadership shakeups or financial troubles shortly before acquisition. Companies just like mine. I closed the laptop, walked to the bar, and poured myself a drink, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just an affair. It was corporate espionage. My wife wasn't just sleeping with another man, she was helping him destroy everything I'd built. I thought about the note that had come with those first photographs. Dig deeper. Nothing is what it seems. Whoever sent those photos hadn't just been exposing an affair. They'd been warning me about something much bigger. A coordinated attack on my life, my company, my future. I picked up my phone and called Stanley again. "I need more," I said when he answered. "I need to know everyone involved in this. Every transaction, every meeting, every phone call. And I need to know about any upcoming plans they might have." "That's going to require more creative methods," Stanley replied carefully. "Do whatever it takes," I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. "This isn't about my marriage anymore. This is war." The Martech Industries financial records sprawled across my home office desk like the scene of a crime. In a way it was. Yellow legal pads filled with my scribbled notes surrounded my laptop. 3 empty coffee cups testified to my sleepless night. I had called in sick, the first time in 5 years, to focus on understanding exactly what was happening to my company. The company I had built from a struggling startup to a respected industry player with over 200 employees who depended on me. "Something interesting in the Q3 investor report," said Frank Chen's voice through my phone speaker. As CFO and my oldest friend, Frank was the only person at Martech I trusted completely. New holding company appeared on our shareholder list. Alpenglow Investments. "Never heard of them," I said, rubbing my tired eyes. "Nobody has." I dug deeper. "They've acquired nearly 6% of outstanding shares in the last 4 months." I straightened in my chair. "And you're just noticing this now?" "They used different broker accounts, kept each purchase under reporting thresholds." Frank's voice tightened. "Michael, someone deliberately structured these purchases to fly under our radar." My mind flashed to Stanley's report. "Check if there's any connection to Alpine Ventures or Meridian Capital Partners." The silence on the other end was brief but telling. "How did you know?" My stomach dropped. "Just a hunch. Meet me at Riverside Park in an hour." "Not the office." The spring air felt unusually cold as Frank and I walked along the tree-lined path, far from any potential eavesdroppers. Birds chirped overhead, oblivious to the storm brewing in my life. "Alpine Ventures is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands," Frank said quietly. "Alpenglow Investments is registered in Delaware. Different company names, different paperwork, but when you trace the ownership structure through the maze of holding companies..." He handed me a folded paper. "Same beneficial owner." I didn't need to open it. "Alex Craig." Frank nodded, visibly surprised. "How long have you known?" "Not long enough." I explained about Emily's affair, the anonymous photos, Stanley's investigation. Everything except my suspicions about Emily's involvement. Some truths were still too painful to share. "Jesus, Michael." Frank's face paled. "This isn't just about stock manipulation. Look at the timing." He pulled out more papers, a timeline he'd created. Share purchases aligned perfectly with our company's setbacks. Lost contracts, delayed product launches, suddenly departed executives. "Our stock price has dropped 17% in 6 months, Frank continued. "Every dip is followed by more purchases from these shell companies. Classic hostile takeover strategy, devalue then acquire." "But how are they getting inside information?" I asked, testing him. Frank hesitated. "Someone high up has to be involved. Someone with access to our strategic planning." His eyes met mine. "You don't think?" I don't know what to think anymore. The lie felt bitter on my tongue. "What else have you found?" "There's a board meeting next Thursday. Not on the official calendar. I only know because Diane from Executive Services let it slip when booking the conference room. A secret board meeting I hadn't been informed about. The pieces were falling into place. "They're making their move," I said. "Planning to force me out." Frank nodded grimly. "The stock price is at its lowest point in 3 years. Perfect timing for the final push." Back in my car, I thumbed through emails I'd intercepted between Emily and Alex. Most were innocuous on the surface, friendly exchanges that wouldn't raise suspicions if discovered accidentally. But now I understood their coded language. "The Peterson project looks promising," Emily had written last month. Peterson was our largest client, the one that had unexpectedly pulled their contract. "Market conditions favor decisive action in Q2, Alex had replied. They weren't just planning my professional demise, they were scheduling it. I drove to Martech's headquarters, using my executive access to enter after hours. The office was silent, the usual hum of activity replaced by the soft whir of air conditioning. I slipped into my office and accessed the secure server, downloading every strategic document, every financial record, every email exchange that might prove useful. As I worked, I found more evidence of manipulation. Board members being approached individually, investment partners receiving misleading reports about our financial stability, potential clients being steered away through whisper campaigns. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily, "Working late again. Don't wait up." I took a deep breath, fighting back the surge of anger and betrayal. Now wasn't the time for emotional confrontation. I needed to be strategic, methodical, just like my enemies. On my way out, I paused at Emily's office. Her door was locked, but the executive master key opened it easily. Inside, her workspace was meticulously organized as always. I searched carefully, leaving everything exactly as I found it, but discovered nothing incriminating. Until I noticed the painting on her wall, an abstract piece I'd given her for our anniversary, hanging slightly askew. Behind it was a small wall safe I'd never seen before. I didn't need to open it to know what I'd find. More evidence. More betrayal. More proof that everything in my life had been built on quicksand. Instead of rushing into battle unprepared, I closed her office and walked away. The enemy thought they had the advantage of surprise. They were wrong. I wasn't going down without a fight. And I had just the right counterattack in mind. The grand ballroom of the Archer Hotel sparkled with champagne flutes and designer dresses. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over Martech's 15th anniversary celebration, an event I'd insisted on hosting despite the company's supposed financial difficulties. "Quite the extravagant party for a struggling company," remarked Jonathan Wells, one of our oldest investors, raising his glass toward me. I smiled, adjusting my cufflinks. "A gift from Emily on our 10th anniversary. Sometimes perception is more important than reality, Jonathan." My eyes drifted across the room to where Emily stood, radiant in a burgundy dress that hugged her curves. She was chatting with a group of board members, laughing at something Barbara Chin had said. The perfect corporate wife. The consummate actress. Frank appeared at my side, nervously fidgeting with his bow tie. "Everything's ready," he whispered. Security confirmed our guest arrived through the service entrance. I nodded, taking a slow sip of champagne to steady my nerves. "And the other matter?" "IT reports all systems go. We can access the screens whenever you're ready." For 3 weeks, I'd worked tirelessly on this moment. Every detail planned, every contingency accounted for. Tonight wasn't just about saving my company, it was about exposing the truth, all of it in one devastating blow. Alex Craig arrived fashionably late, drawing attention as he entered the ballroom. Tall, with silver-streaked dark hair and the easy confidence of old money, he commanded respect with his mere presence. Several board members immediately gravitated toward him, including Thomas Winters, our newest addition to the board, and I'd recently discovered Alex's former college roommate. I watched Emily's reaction from across the room. The slight stiffening of her posture, the carefully measured glance, the deliberate way she waited 3 minutes before casually making her way toward his group. They'd choreographed this dance so carefully that nobody else would notice the subtle signals passing between them. Nobody except a husband who had studied every gesture, every glance, every movement of the wife he thought he knew. Throughout dinner, I played my part, the oblivious founder, grateful for everyone's support through challenging times. I thanked investors, praised employees, and raised toasts to future success. All while observing Alex and Emily, noting how they maintained perfect distance, their only interactions happening in brief moments when they thought no one was watching. A brush of fingers when passing a breadbasket. A meaningful glance during applause. A whispered comment behind a napkin. After dessert, Alex approached me directly for the first time that evening. "Michael, remarkable event." His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Though perhaps surprising, given Martech's recent performance. "We've weathered storms before," I replied evenly. "Indeed. Though I foresee inevitable changes on the horizon." His eyes gleamed with something between triumph and pity. "Sometimes new leadership is necessary for a company to reach its true potential." I matched his smile with one of my own. "You know what they say about forecasts, Alex? They're often wrong." A slight frown creased his forehead at my use of his first name. I hadn't been introduced to him officially, a small but satisfying crack in his composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, stepping up to the microphone at center stage. The room gradually quieted. 15 years ago, Martech began in a garage with 2 computers and an impossible dream. Tonight, we celebrate not just survival but evolution. I spoke about challenges overcome, relationships built, futures envisioned. Throughout my speech, I watched Emily's face, searching for any hint of remorse or hesitation. There was none. "Success isn't measured by stock prices or quarterly reports," I continued. "It's measured by integrity, by honesty, by doing the right thing even when it's difficult." I paused, letting the words settle. "Which brings me to a special announcement." Emily shifted uncomfortably. Alex's expression remained impassive, but his fingers tightened around his champagne flute. "We have an unexpected guest tonight," I said. "Someone whose perspective on integrity and honesty might be particularly valuable." The side door opened. A hush fell over the crowd as a man entered, mid-40s, walking with a slight limp, his face bearing a striking resemblance to Alex Craig. "May I introduce Nicholas Craig," I said into the sudden silence. "The brother whom many of you believe died in a car accident 6 years ago." The glass slipped from Alex's hand, shattering on the marble floor. Emily's face drained of color. Around the room, confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nicholas approached the microphone, his eyes locked on his brother. "Hello, Alex," he said quietly. It's been a long time. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Security guards discreetly moved to block the exits. On the massive screens around the room, financial records began to appear, documents showing the elaborate fraud Alex had perpetrated, first against his own brother, then against Martech Industries. Across the room, Emily backed away slowly, her eyes darting between Alex and me. In that moment, as our gazes locked, I saw something I'd never expected. Not defiance, not anger, but naked fear. The game had changed. And she knew it. Security escorted a struggling Alex toward the exit, his perfect composure shattered into rage and desperation. "This is absurd. You can't do this," he shouted, his polished veneer cracking with each word. The assembled guests, investors, board members, employees, watched in stunned silence. I nodded to Frank, who directed 2 officers to follow Alex to ensure he didn't flee before the police arrived. The evidence we'd gathered was more than enough for charges of fraud, market manipulation, and corporate espionage. Emily stood frozen near the bar, her knuckles white around her clutch. When our eyes met, she turned and hurried toward the terrace. I let her go. There would be time for that conversation later. Nicholas Craig approached me, extending his hand. Up close, the family resemblance to Alex was even more striking. The same chiseled jawline and penetrating eyes, though Nicholas's face carried more lines, more history. "Thank you," he said simply. "I've waited a long time for this moment." We moved to a private room off the main ballroom, away from the murmuring crowd and flashing phones. Nicholas walked with a pronounced limp, the result, I would learn, of the accident that had supposedly claimed his life. "My brother was always ambitious," Nicholas began, lowering himself carefully into a leather chair. "But it wasn't until our father died that the real Alex emerged." The story unfolded like a Greek tragedy. The Craig family fortune built over generations. The expected inheritance to be split between the brothers. The mysterious accident on a deserted mountain road that sent Nicholas's car over a cliff. "I survived barely," Nicholas said, his voice steady despite the horror of his memories. "When I regained consciousness in a rural hospital weeks later, my identity had been erased. My accounts emptied. My home sold. According to all official records, Nicholas Craig was dead. And Alex inherited everything," I concluded. "Everything. Our family business. Properties across 3 countries. The art collection alone was worth millions." Nicholas's smile held no humor. "He even had a memorial service. I saw the photos online from my hospital bed." "How did you survive?" "A nurse recognized something wasn't right. Helped me establish a new identity. I've spent the past 6 years gathering evidence, building a case." He leaned forward. "But Alex was always one step ahead, using his connections to block every legal avenue I pursued." "Until now," I said. "Until you," Nicholas corrected. "When I learned he was targeting Martech, I started investigating. That's when I discovered the connection." "What connection?" Nicholas studied me carefully. "You really don't know, do you? About your father and mine?" The revelation hit like a physical blow. 40 years ago, Craig Investments and Harrison Technologies, my father's company, had been partners in developing revolutionary software for the banking industry. When the market crashed in the mid-80s, only one company survived. "Your father blamed mine for pulling out their investment at the critical moment," Nicholas explained. "George Harrison lost everything. Edward Craig emerged stronger than ever. My father had never spoken of this betrayal. He'd rebuilt from nothing, instilling in me the same resilient work ethic, never mentioning the Craig name. Had he known when I started dating Emily about her connection to Alex? The timeline fit. Alex would have recruited her precisely because of her proximity to me, son of his father's former partner. This wasn't just business for Alex," Nicholas continued. "It was finishing what our father started, destroying the last Harrison company. Using your wife was just part of the poetry of his revenge." The door opened and Frank entered with a police detective. As they discussed the evidence and charges, my mind drifted to Emily. How much had she known about this generational vendetta? Had she been a willing participant or merely a pawn? I excused myself and found her on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. Her makeup was smudged where tears had fallen. "How long have you known?" she asked without turning around. "About the affair?" "Weeks." "About the corporate espionage?" "Days." "About the history between our families?" "Minutes." She nodded slowly. "He never told me about your father's. I thought it was just about the money." Her voice cracked. "It started so innocently. Flattery. Attention. Then small requests for information. by the time I realized how deep I was. "You could have come to me," I said, surprising myself with how hollow the words sounded. "I was going to." She finally turned to face me, her hands protectively cradling her abdomen. "Especially after I found out about the baby." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're pregnant?" Her eyes were full of a complicated mix of emotions: shame, fear, uncertainty. 8 weeks. She hesitated, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of sirens approaching. "I don't know who the father is." The night air suddenly felt thin, insufficient. The perfect life I'd thought I had, successful company, loving marriage, promising future, had been an elaborate illusion. Now, as police lights flashed in the distance, all that remained were questions and impossible choices. "What happens now?" Emily whispered. I looked back toward the ballroom where Nicholas was speaking with the police, where board members huddled in confused groups, where the carefully constructed facade of my life had spectacularly collapsed. "Now," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears, "we deal with the truth. All of it." The penthouse suite of the Archer Hotel felt cavernous and cold despite its luxury. Emily sat across from me, her celebration dress exchanged for a simple blouse and pants, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. Between us lay the evidence of her betrayal, printouts of emails, bank statements, photographs, spread across the coffee table like tarot cards foretelling our future. "I want to hear everything," I said. "No more lies. No more half-truths." The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of broken vows and shattered trust. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city twinkled indifferently. "It started at the Richards' Christmas party," Emily finally began, her voice small but steady. "Alex approached me, knew exactly who I was, who you were. He was charming, attentive in a way that—" She paused, eyes flicking to mine before dropping again. "In a way you hadn't been for months." I wanted to protest, to defend my dedication to building our future, but what was the point? We were well beyond such petty defenses. He suggested lunch. "Just to discuss marketing opportunities," he said. One lunch became 2, then dinner. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. The first time he asked about Martech's expansion plans, I should have recognized the red flag. But by then I was already sleeping with him, I finished flatly. She nodded, a single tear tracking down her cheek. The first request seemed harmless, just public information about the Johnson contract. Then he needed meeting minutes. Then draft proposals. Her words came faster now, as if relieving herself of a physical burden. Each time the payments grew larger. Each time he assured me it was just business intelligence, nothing illegal. "And you believe that?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "I wanted to," she whispered. When doubts crept in, there was always a weekend in Paris or a diamond bracelet to quiet them. She gestured helplessly. "I told myself you were so consumed with the company that you'd never notice. That I deserved something for myself after years of business dinners and networking events where I was just window dressing." I laughed humorlessly. "So you helped him destroy everything I built? Everything we built? Our future?" "I didn't know he was trying to destroy you." "Not at first." Her eyes flashed with unexpected fire. "By the time I realized how deep the plan went, I was compromised. The offshore account, the hotel meetings, the insider information, he had evidence of everything. If I backed out, he'd ruin me. Maybe even press charges." "And the baby?" I asked, the words sticking in my throat. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. "That wasn't part of the plan. For either of us." I stood and walked to the window, needing physical distance from her words. Behind me, I heard her quiet sobs but felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just a vast emptiness where love had once resided. When I turned back, I had made my decision. "Here's what happens now," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "You're going to tell the complete truth to the investigators. Every meeting, every document you shared, every dollar you received." Her eyes widened with fear. "Michael, I'll go to prison." "Maybe. That depends on how valuable your testimony is against Alex. Nicholas and I can speak to the prosecutor about cooperation agreements." Hope flickered briefly in her expression. "You do that? After everything?" "Not for you," I clarified. "For the company. For the employees whose livelihoods were put at risk. And yes, partly for the child you're carrying, who may or may not be mine." I laid out the rest of my terms. She would transfer all the money from her secret account to a trust for the baby. She would sign a confession detailing her role in the corporate espionage. And she would take a paternity test as soon as medically advisable. If the child is mine, we'll discuss arrangements then, I said. If not. I left the sentence unfinished. Emily nodded, accepting each condition without protest. What about us? She asked softly when I had finished. There is no us, Emily. Not anymore. I do love you, Michael. That wasn't a lie. Her voice broke. It just wasn't enough. I stared at this woman who had been my wife, my partner, my future for 11 years. Part of me wanted to believe her, to find some fragment of our marriage worth salvaging. But the larger part knew we could never rebuild on such a fractured foundation. Tomorrow morning we're holding a press conference, I told her. The company needs to control the narrative before the market opens. This is your chance to show remorse publicly, to tell your side before the prosecutors build theirs. I'll do it, she agreed, wiping away tears. I'll say whatever you need me to say. Not whatever I need, I corrected her firmly. The truth. For once. As I left the suite, I felt an odd sense of lightness. The worst had happened, my marriage destroyed, my company threatened, my future uncertain, yet I was still standing. In exposing the web of lies surrounding me, I had reclaimed something essential, my own truth. I called Nicholas from the elevator. It's done, I said. She'll cooperate. And you? He asked. How are you holding up? I watched the floor numbers descend, taking me further from the life I had known. Ask me tomorrow, I replied. After the press conference. The cameras flashed like lightning strikes, momentarily blinding me as I approached the podium. The hotel's conference room was packed with reporters, industry analysts, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the public unraveling of what the business pages had already dubbed the Martech scandal. I adjusted the microphone and gazed out at the sea of expectant faces. Behind me stood Frank, Nicholas, and our legal team. The empty chair to my right screamed louder than any words could. Good morning, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. As you know, Martech Industries has recently uncovered evidence of corporate espionage and market manipulation directed against our company. We are cooperating fully with authorities as they investigate these serious allegations. I outlined the basics: the fraudulent stock purchases, the insider trading, Alex Craig's arrest, careful to stick to facts already in public record. Questions erupted like popcorn. Is it true your wife was involved in this scheme? Has the board asked for your resignation? What's your relationship with Nicholas Craig, the supposed dead brother? I held up my hand. Before I take questions, there's someone else who would like to make a statement. All heads turned toward the side entrance where Emily was supposed to appear. 10 seconds passed. 20. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. She's not in her room. Security says she left the hotel 2 hours ago with luggage. The realization hit like a physical blow. Even now, at the end, one final betrayal. It appears Mrs. Harrison won't be joining us after all, I said, attempting to mask my shock. I'll take your questions now. The press conference devolved into exactly the feeding frenzy I had hoped to avoid. Without Emily's public contrition to balance the narrative, I stood alone against the onslaught. By afternoon, every financial news outlet was running stories speculating on my knowledge or complicity. Martech stock plummeted another 15% before trading was temporarily halted. 3 days later, the board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but Frank texted me updates in real time. They're voting now, his message read. I'm sorry, Michael. I was sitting in my home office, staring at the formal letter of suspension that had arrived that morning. The board had reluctantly decided to place me on administrative leave, pending investigation. Thomas Winters, Alex's old college roommate, had been named interim CEO. My phone rang, Barbara Chin, the longest-serving board member. Michael, I need you to know I fought for you, she said without preamble. But the institutional investors are panicking. The stock has lost nearly 40% of its value in a week. It's a temporary reaction to sensationalist headlines, I argued. The company fundamentals are strong. The fundamentals don't matter if we can't make payroll because our credit lines get pulled. Her voice softened. Take some time away. Let the investigation clear your name. Then we can discuss your return. We both knew it was a lie. In the corporate world, perception creates reality. Once removed, CEOs rarely return to their former glory. That evening I received another blow, a call from Detective Ramirez. Mr. Harrison, we've been unable to locate your wife. Her credit cards were last used to purchase a ticket to Zurich, but she never boarded that flight. What about Alex Craig? Could she have gone to him? Mr. Craig remains in custody without bail, Ramirez assured me. But we've discovered large withdrawals from an account connected to him the day before your press conference. Nearly $2 million gone. After hanging up, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and walked out to my back porch. The sunset painted the sky in mocking shades of gold and rose, the same colors Emily had chosen for our wedding. The bank had already called about our mortgage. My personal accounts were temporarily frozen pending the investigation. My lawyer advised me to prepare for prolonged legal battles on multiple fronts. In 1 week, I had lost my wife, my company, my reputation, and potentially my freedom if the investigation couldn't distinguish between my actions and Emily's. Everything I had spent 15 years building had crumbled like sand. I was contemplating this complete destruction when the gate buzzer sounded. Nicholas Craig's voice came through the intercom. "I know you probably want to be alone," he said. "But I brought pizza and information." Nicholas limped in carrying a file folder and a pizza box that smelled of garlic and pepperoni. He took in my disheveled appearance without comment, setting everything down on the coffee table. "You look like hell," he finally said, opening the pizza box. "I feel worse," I admitted. "What's the information?" He slid the folder across to me. "I've been tracking some offshore transfers. I think I know where Emily's gone." I stared at the folder without touching it. "Does it matter anymore?" "It matters because she's running with evidence we need. It matters because she emptied accounts that rightfully belong to you." He leaned forward. "And it matters because giving up isn't in our DNA, Michael. My brother tried to kill me and erase my existence. Your wife tried to destroy everything you built. Yet here we are." I finally opened the folder, scanning bank records and flight manifests. "So what now?" I asked, feeling the first stirrings of something beyond despair. Nicholas smiled grimly. "Now we fight back. Starting tonight." Dawn broke over the city skyline, painting glass towers in hues of amber and gold. I hadn't slept. The dining room table of my rapidly shrinking world was covered with legal documents, financial records, and empty coffee mugs, the archaeology of a life being excavated for salvation. "Found something," Nicholas announced, sliding a document across to me. His eyes were bloodshot from our all-night session, but there was a spark of triumph in them. "The acquisition paperwork has a fundamental flaw." I scanned the highlighted section. A technical error in how the shell companies had structured their purchases. "This isn't enough to void the transactions," I said. "Not by itself," Nicholas agreed. "But combined with evidence of fraudulent intent and this overlooked clause in Martech's original incorporation documents." He tapped another paper with surprising energy for a man who hadn't slept in 24 hours. I read it twice, comprehension dawning slowly through my exhaustion. "This gives the founding investor veto power over any change of control transaction." And that founding investor is? My father's original partner, James Winthrop. I hadn't thought about the elderly angel investor in years. He'd put up seed money when nobody else would touch my college startup, taking a tiny percentage of ownership that had seemed meaningless once we'd scaled. "Who still owns 0.5% of Martech," Nicholas confirmed. "And who, according to public records, has never sold a single share." For the first time in days I felt something like hope. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of clandestine meetings and legal maneuvering. I sold my house to fund the battle, moving into a Spartan apartment near Nicholas's place. Every asset I could liquidate went toward our war chest. Watches, cars, even Emily's abandoned jewelry, which I sold with no small amount of vindictive satisfaction. James Winthrop, now 84 and living in a retirement community in Arizona, was delighted to hear from me. "Always knew that company would make something of itself," he said over a scratchy phone connection. "Never trusted those new investors, not one bit." With Winthrop's enthusiastic support, we filed an emergency injunction against the board's actions. Our legal team discovered that Thomas Winters had violated fiduciary duties by failing to disclose his personal connection to Alex Craig during the takeover attempt. Meanwhile, Nicholas worked his financial contacts, tracing the money trail through a labyrinth of offshore accounts. Alex had been siphoning funds from his own investment firm for years, leaving a devastating hole that would become apparent to his clients and regulators if exposed. "Mutually assured destruction," Nicholas explained as we developed our strategy. "We have enough to put him away for decades, but we can offer a deal that lets him save face, and his personal fortune, if he cooperates." On the personal front, Detective Ramirez called with news of Emily's whereabouts. "Facial recognition picked her up in Buenos Aires," he said. "But she's moved on since. We're coordinating with international authorities." I thanked him but felt strangely detached. The woman who had shared my bed and betrayed my trust seemed increasingly like a character from someone else's story. A painful chapter one was determined to close. While reviewing documents late one night at a 24-hour coffee shop, my new office since I could no longer access Martech headquarters, I noticed a woman at a nearby table glancing repeatedly in my direction. Dark hair, sharp eyes, professional attire despite the late hour. When she approached, I tensed, expecting another reporter seeking comment on the scandal. "Mr. Harrison," she said, extending her hand. "Layla Kareem. I'm a financial analyst with Global Securities." "I don't have any comment on the Martech situation," I replied automatically. She smiled, undeterred. "I'm not here about your comments. I'm here about these." She pulled out a laptop and opened a spreadsheet I immediately recognized as Martech's internal financial projections. Documents that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside the company. "Where did you get these?" I demanded. "I specialize in forensic accounting," she explained. "I've been tracking some unusual patterns in your company's trading activity for months." She turned the screen toward me. "These discrepancies aren't random. They're systematic manipulation, and I can prove it." For the next hour, Layla walked me through a compelling analysis of how Alex Craig had orchestrated Martech's apparent financial decline. Her insights filled critical gaps in our understanding of the scheme. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked when she finished. She closed her laptop. "Because I believe in fixing broken systems, not profiting from them. And because I've followed your career for years. What happened to you wasn't just unfair, it was criminal." As she gathered her things to leave, I made an impulsive decision. "Would you consider consulting for us?" "Officially?" The connection between us was immediate and undeniable, an unexpected spark amid the ashes of my former life. But I quickly redirected the energy to safer, more professional territory. Romance was the last thing I needed while rebuilding from rubble. "I'll call you tomorrow with details," I promised as she wrote her number on a napkin. "I look forward to it," she replied with a smile that lingered in my thoughts long after she'd gone. That night, for the first time since everything collapsed, I slept without nightmares. The path forward remained treacherous, but finally I could see its direction. Phoenix-like, something new was emerging from destruction, perhaps something stronger than what had come before. The conference room in our lawyer's office hummed with cautious optimism. 6 weeks of relentless work had culminated in this moment. Our legal team had successfully petitioned the court for an emergency hearing on our evidence of fraud and corporate malfeasance. "Judge Thornton has a reputation for prioritizing investor protection," explained Margaret Wilson, our lead attorney. "If she grants our motion, the board's actions will be frozen pending full investigation." Layla sat beside me, her shoulder occasionally brushing mine as she reviewed the financial exhibits we'd prepared. In the weeks since our coffee shop meeting, she had become indispensable to our cause, her financial expertise uncovering layers of manipulation even Nicholas hadn't detected. "The hearing is scheduled for Monday," Margaret continued. "We're as prepared as we can be, but there's one significant weakness in our case." "Emily," I said, the name still bitter on my tongue. Margaret nodded. "Without her testimony about how information was passed to Alex, we're relying heavily on circumstantial evidence. We've filed subpoenas in 3 countries, Nicholas reminded us. She can't hide forever." The room fell silent, each of us contemplating the precariousness of our position. Then, as if summoned by our discussion, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Michael." The voice I'd once loved, now a stranger's. "It's me." I signaled to the others and put the phone on speaker. "Emily. International fugitive status suits you, I hear." "I'm not calling for sarcasm." Her voice sounded strained, tired. "I made a terrible mistake." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Layla watched me intently as I responded. "Which one? The affair, the corporate espionage, or running with stolen money?" "All of it," she said quietly. "Alex abandoned me. Took everything and disappeared. I was just another pawn in his game." Despite everything, some foolish part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. I ruthlessly suppressed it. "What do you want, Emily?" "To make things right." There was a tremor in her voice. "I have all the evidence you need, emails, account numbers, recordings of Alex discussing the takeover plan. Everything." The room electrified. This was exactly what we needed, the smoking gun that would cement our case. "Why now?" Nicholas asked skeptically. "Because I've lost everything that matters," she replied. "And because I'm scared, Michael. Alex has dangerous connections. If I testify against him without protection..." I understood immediately. "You want immunity." I want safety, she corrected. And yes, I don't want to go to prison. The baby? She paused. I had genetic testing done. It's yours, Michael. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Layla's expression remained carefully neutral, but her hand moved imperceptibly closer to mine on the table. After discussion with the legal team, we arranged a meeting for the following evening. Emily would come to my apartment with the evidence, and we would take her statement with attorneys present. I don't trust this, Nicholas said after the call ended. It's too convenient. Neither do I agreed. But we need her testimony. We should take precautions, Layla suggested. Make copies of everything we already have, store them separately. I spent the night securing our documents, making digital backups and preparing for Emily's return. Sleep eluded me, my mind cycling through possibilities. Was she telling the truth about the baby? Could there be redemption for either of us after so much betrayal? Emily arrived exactly on time, looking thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes. She carried a sleek laptop and a small suitcase. Everything's here, she said, patting the computer. Emails, financial records, recorded conversations. Enough to bury Alex and clear your name. While our lawyers reviewed the material, Emily and I stepped onto the balcony for a moment of privacy. I'm sorry, she said simply. Not just for the affair or the company. For us. For what we could have been. I studied her face, once so beloved, now a map of deceptions. Was any of it real? More than you'd believe. She touched my arm hesitantly. The baby is due in October. Whatever happens between us, I hope you'll be part of his life. Something in her expression, a flicker of the old Emily, made me relent slightly. Let's get through the hearing first. She nodded, seeming relieved. I'd like to freshen up before we continue. Mind if I use your bathroom? I gestured toward the hallway, watching her walk away with mixed emotions. Our lawyers looked up from the laptop, nodding approvingly at what they'd found. This is exactly what we needed, Margaret confirmed. With this evidence, A crash from the bedroom interrupted her. I rushed down the hallway to find the window open, curtains billowing in the night breeze. The bathroom door stood ajar and used. With growing dread, I returned to the living room. The laptop was gone. So was Emily's suitcase. On the coffee table lay a single USB drive and a handwritten note. You never learn, do you? We've always been one step ahead. I plugged the drive into my computer with shaking hands. It contained a single file, a photograph of Emily and Alex on a yacht, champagne glasses raised in mocking toast, timestamped just hours earlier. The evidence we'd been reviewing had been corrupted or deleted from our system. Our secured files were gone. Tomorrow's hearing now loomed as a potential disaster rather than our salvation. Emily's final betrayal was her most devastating yet. The courthouse steps loomed before me like a mountain I lacked the strength to climb. Around me, reporters jostled for position, shouting questions I couldn't bear to answer. Our legal team moved in a protective formation, Margaret's expression grim as she whispered, "Remember, we still have your testimony and Nicholas's. It's not over." But it felt over. The sleepless night had yielded no miracles, no recovery of the stolen evidence. We were walking into Judge Thornton's courtroom with a case built on foundation that had crumbled beneath us. "Mr. Harrison." Nicholas gripped my shoulder. "Whatever happens in there, remember who you are." The courtroom fell silent as we entered. Across the aisle sat Thomas Winters and the Martech board members who had abandoned me. Their legal team, 6 attorneys from the city's most expensive firm, arranged papers with confident smiles. Judge Thornton, a stern-faced woman with reading glasses perched low on her nose, called the hearing to order. Our attorney began presenting our case, outlining the fraud allegations with as much conviction as our diminished evidence allowed. I was so focused on the proceedings that I almost missed Layla slipping into the courtroom. She caught my eye and gave a slight nod before taking a seat in the back row. Something in her demeanor, a contained energy, a secret knowledge, made me straighten in my chair. Halfway through our presentation, the courtroom doors opened again. A woman in a crisp FBI jacket entered, followed by 2 agents. They approached the bench, presenting credentials to Judge Thornton, whose eyebrows rose visibly. "Your Honor," the woman said, "I'm Special Agent Diana Carter with the Financial Crimes Division. We request a brief recess to present new evidence relevant to this case." The judge granted a 30-minute recess. As the courtroom buzzed with speculation, Layla made her way to me. "What's happening?" I asked. Her smile was small but triumphant. "Remember when I said I specialize in forensic accounting? What I didn't mention is who I work for." Before she could explain further, Agent Carter approached us. "Mr. Harrison, we need to speak privately." In a small conference room, Agent Carter laid out a series of photographs and documents. "We've been investigating Alex Craig for 18 months, she explained. "Your wife wasn't the only one under surveillance." The photos showed Emily and Alex on the yacht, not celebrating as the doctored image had suggested, but being monitored by agents on a nearby boat. Other images showed them being taken into custody at a private airfield in the Cayman Islands. "Last night's operation was the culmination of a multi-agency investigation into international money laundering," Carter continued. "Mr. Craig's activities triggered red flags long before he targeted your company." "You knew about Emily?" I asked, still processing. "Ms. Karim identified unusual patterns in your wife's financial transactions months ago," Carter nodded toward Layla. "When she connected those to Mr. Craig's larger scheme, we brought her onto the task force." Layla met my surprised gaze. "I couldn't tell you. We needed to ensure the entire network was exposed. The evidence your wife attempted to destroy was already secured," Agent Carter assured me. "We have copies of everything, including recordings of her collaboration with Craig." When court resumed, the landscape had shifted dramatically. Agent Carter testified about the federal investigation, presenting evidence that not only validated our claims but expanded them into a comprehensive case against Alex Craig's entire operation. Thomas Winters turned ashen as his own complicity was exposed through emails and bank transfers. Several board members distanced themselves, whispering urgently to their attorneys. Judge Thornton's expression grew increasingly severe. By day's end, the judge had issued a preliminary ruling. All board actions since my suspension were immediately frozen. A court-appointed trustee would oversee Martech until the full case was resolved. Alex Craig, Emily, and several co-conspirators faced federal charges for securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Outside the courthouse, as television cameras captured the scene, Nicholas shook my hand. "Not how we planned it, but I'll take it." "What happens now?" I asked Agent Carter as she prepared to leave. "Mr. Craig is facing 20 to 30 years. Your wife is looking at 8 to 10, though cooperation could reduce that." She paused. "She's requested to speak with you, by the way." I nodded, not yet ready to decide whether I would grant that request. As the crowd dispersed, Layla remained. "I'm sorry I couldn't be completely honest about my role. You saved my company. Possibly my life." I studied her face, seeing it clearly for the first time. "I think I can forgive the omission." 1 year later, I stood at the window of my office at Martech, watching the city below. After months of legal proceedings, the company had emerged stronger, with new governance safeguards and a refreshed leadership team. The scandal had faded from headlines, replaced by stories of our innovative new products and philanthropic initiatives, including the Fraud Victim Support Foundation I had established. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Layla entered, her smile warming me as it had increasingly done over the past months. "Ready for dinner? Nicholas is already waiting at the restaurant." I took her hand, feeling the simple joy of honest connection. The future stretched before us, uncertain but full of possibilities. That morning, I had visited the women's correctional facility where Emily was serving her sentence. She had asked to see me to finalize our divorce and to discuss arrangements for our son, now 4 months old and living with her sister. "He has your eyes," she'd said, sliding a photograph across the table. As I signed the divorce papers, Emily had asked if I could ever forgive her. "I already have," I'd replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. "You taught me a valuable lesson about strength I never knew I had." Walking out with Layla now, I felt the weight of the past finally lifting. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately revealed a resilience I never knew I possessed. Sometimes justice finds its path in the most unexpected ways,